Hey there, my name's Portia Lori. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And I'm super pumped about today's video. Today I'm going to be taking a look back at the first season of one of the most salacious teen shows I think I ever watched that I actually watched in real time, Gossip Girl. A deep dive into the scandalous world of this New York teen drama, managing to change a generation through hair bows and sidekicks. These kids briefly took over the world and launched many copycat attempts. Gossip Girl was a CW show that premiered in 2007. It starred Blake Lively, Leighton Meester, Penn Badgley, amongst an ensemble cast, and it was probably one of the most talked about and semi-revolutionary TV shows of the late 2000s, early 2010s. This video will be exploring the history of the book series, transition to television, how the advertisement contracts kept this show afloat in the early aughts while filming in the Big Apple. But before we get into that, as always, if you enjoy my opinion on all things pop culture, movies, TV shows, music, what have you, do me a solid and drop a like on this video, then run over to that subscribe button, hit the bell next to it, so you can be notified every time I upload. Before I dive too deep, I do want to let you know there's a couple things that I've decided I'm not going to be touching on, so if these are things that you tuned into this video thinking I would talk about, I'm going to relieve you of sticking around. I will be talking briefly about the history of Gossip Girl, but I will not be spending too much time in the book section, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But if you are looking for someone who is really knowledgeable or read the book series, not your girl. 2, I know that there is a reboot on HBO. I'm perfectly aware. I could not avoid all of the information I received about a show that I have zero interest in watching. There's just something about it that just tells me it's not worth my time. It kind of looks like it's going to be Riverdale, but on HBO, so there's like swearing. Like, I don't feel like it's gonna be Euphoria, and even that is like really pushing my limits of like what I can handle watching. But anyway, I'm just not interested in the reboot whatsoever. So this video will actually contain no information about the reboot whatsoever. I'm not gonna be comparing characters. I'm not doing any of that. Let's move on. So I feel like it's relatively common knowledge now, but if we're gonna talk about Gossip Girl, I feel like we gotta talk about the book series before we can really get into the television show. So something that's really important to know about Gossip Girl, the book series, is that it was created by Alloy Entertainment. If you have any familiarity with Alloy Entertainment, you might recognize them as owning properties like Pretty Little Liars, The Vampire Diaries, or You. And something really interesting about Alloy Entertainment is that they kind of built a pipeline so that all of their media could kind of work off of each other. So when Gossip Girl, the series, was being crafted over at the Alloy Entertainment studios, they knew that they wanted to create something that would also translate well to screen. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like it's a little bit of a buzzkill to find out things like this because, like, I want to believe that most artists, writers, whatever, are coming up with these stories on their own. But there's actually these, a lot of times, really big manufacturing companies that just kind of pump out these generic stories and then we just gobble it up, not realizing that we're just kind of like being fed from the machine. Anyway, I was low-key a little sad to find out that Gossip Girl wasn't created by this like socialite that lived in New York City. It was just made by a woman who worked for a book publishing company, and she did grow up in New York and she did go to the private schools, but like, this wasn't like her own creation or anything. No put down to the author or anything. I'm just saying it kind of hurt my soul a little bit. Moving on. So the original book series is a YA novel series based on the lives of rich Upper East Side teenagers attending 2 prep schools in New York City. The main characters, an Audrey Hepburn wannabe, Blair Waldorf, and her on-again, off-again best friend socialite, Serena Vanderwoodson. Their battle for attention, attractiveness, and power serves as a central feud. Salacious events and scandals ridden the pretend adults and are chronicled in a popular fictional blog, Gossip Girl. Now, I mentioned earlier that I wouldn't really be getting too far into the book series, and that's because I just am not very well versed in the series at large. And to be quite honest, I really didn't like the books. I do remember reading the first one, and I believe that one caught my attention because after reading the back, I thought that the idea of like the Serena character mysteriously leaving New York and then coming back, I thought that was a super interesting plot line. So I was like, oh yeah, like I'll pick up this book. And while I do think Gossip Girl is a really enjoyable, fun show to watch, I didn't find myself gravitating towards the books at all. I didn't feel like those characters really came to life for me from a book standpoint. I just didn't think there was anything super remarkable or memorable, for that matter, from the book series. So now that we've gone a little bit over the background of how the original series was created, let's move into how the show got from a book to a screen. So this is probably the most interesting fact that I researched while I was making this video, and it blew up my mind, and the fact that I didn't know it until now is kind of insane. Gossip Girl was originally going to be a film vehicle for launching Lindsay Lohan into the absolute stratosphere. We're talking Lindsay Lohan was supposed to play Blair Waldorf in a Gossip Girl movie, possible franchise type situation. And the icing on the cake of this information is not only was it supposed to be this Lindsay Lohan driven Blair Waldorf mega movie, it was going to be written by Amy Sherman Palladino. What? I am a huge Gilmore Girls nut. I love Gilmore Girls. The thing that I love the most about it is how they speak, how speedy the dialogue is. I love how many references to just culture in general, not just pop culture, every kind of everything. There's so many references that you really got to pay attention to. You can easily miss something in dialogue, go back and rewatch it and pick up new things that you didn't know. And the idea that Amy Sherman Palladino could have had her hands in the pot for Gossip Girl, oh my God. There could have been more good seasons besides like 2 out of 6. I'm just saying. I'm not an anti-Gossip Girl. Don't get me wrong. I love Gossip Girl. Trash TV all day. But the show, you know what? We'll get into it later. Anyway, by far the coolest piece of information I have picked up thus far in researching for this show. But obviously, the film deal ended up falling through. And after that, Josh Schwartz, who you might recognize as a producer from a little TV show called The OC, thus we had a television show. In 2006, Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage of The OC acquired the rights, got signed to the CW, basing the first episode on the first book. But from my understanding, beyond that point, nothing. That is the end of the connection, besides the logistics, to the book series. At least that's my understanding of it. So now let's get into how some of our favorite actors became some of our favorite characters on Gossip Girl. Jennifer Lawrence originally auditioned for Gossip Girl to play Serena and has spoken in interviews to be extremely bummed to not land the gig. Blake Lively and Leighton Meester were the first to be cast. Ed Westwick and Matthew Settle, both of whom are British, were some of the final castings. Leighton Meester first auditioned for Serena, but wanted to play the role of Blair so badly she dyed her hair to differentiate herself from Blake. Leighton Meester is naturally blonde, and I could imagine that for casting reasons, or at least when you're going through pilot season, you probably are just auditioning for anything you happen to fall into the look for. So I also could very well see that originally they brought her in, they wanted her to play Serena, she read for the role, and they were like, she's not quite right for that, why don't you read for this? And then they were still on the fence, so then she dyed her hair. I imagine it's one of those scenarios. Like it was one of them. I don't know which one is the most accurate. I wasn't there. Ed Westwick, who was eventually cast as Chuck, was originally auditioning to play Nate, which is a completely different universe. I could not imagine where Ed Westwick in any which way could play Nate. And I don't mean that as like a diss to the actor. I genuinely can't picture it. A lot of the casting for the show, I think, was done so superbly that regardless of the plot or lack thereof, I feel like the casting was always so on point that you could, as an audience member, just kind of buy the dream that they're selling. Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage pushed for the show to be shot in New York. It was important for them that the city become one of the characters amongst the ensemble, which I would argue was one of the most important and impactful pieces that they fought for on the show. I think New York does become this secondary character. In a lot of ways, I feel like if this show had been shot on a lot like i.e. How I Met Your Mother or How I Met Your Father, where the show is filmed in LA and it's just sets that it's a Warner Brothers lot where it looks like New York. I don't think this show would have worked nearly as well if that had been the case, or if they were just using indoor sets. I don't think it would have really made the show come alive the way it did. Now, a downside to shooting in New York, it is quite expensive. And so to kind of balance out how expensive it was to be shooting this giant show in New York City, they took a lot of advertisement deals. And you will see this sprinkled out throughout the show. Season 1 is tame compared to like the vitamin water party at the beginning of season 2. And it just gets more and more intense with the advertisements. But as someone who's now had all this research and I went back to start rewatching it for this video, I can really appreciate, honestly, like I don't mind 2 seconds of a product being visible just so that I could see these characters really go to the Met and sit on the steps. Like I think those sacrifices are actually really strategic and smart, and I really value the show for doing that to make it all happen. Now, also in the beginning of the show, Gossip Girl was somewhat of a pioneer towards the streaming culture that would soon become mainstream culture. At the time that Gossip Girl premiered, which was in 2007, streaming was not a thing yet. Netflix did exist. It was not nearly as popular as it is today or even was 10 years ago. At the time, Gossip Girl created contracts with Netflix so that as soon as the episodes would drop, or it might have been a season thing, I don't remember, they had the rights and would begin streaming it as soon as it had aired, as well as Amazon Prime Video, where you could actually purchase episodes. The iTunes Store, back when we all had iPod Touches, y'all remember those? You could purchase the episodes of Gossip Girl to rewatch on your little tiny screen the day after they premiered, which was pretty revolutionary at the time. And I think that definitely helped the show in terms of finding an audience and being able to really sell them things, to be honest. It's what was keeping the lights on, okay? So now what I've truly come here to do, let's talk about season 1 of Gossip Girl. Introduction to high society in New York, told through the lens of high school students and their antagonist, a gossip journalist named Gossip Girl, an Upper East Side elite stalker with an unknown identity. Gossip Girl showcases various rich families and their inner workings, as well as their connections to one another. Season 1's main plot is introducing the main characters and hinting at their various secrets and nefarious intentions that will be exploited by the one and only gossip blogger. Each episode was a play on movie titles. You've got Mail, You've Got Yale, etc. So I'm not going to talk about every episode because that would be boring as hell. But I think the first thing I want to get into are the main characters. So let's start with the one, the only, Serena Vanderwoodson. So Serena Vanderwoodson is this mysteriously beautiful Upper East Side socialite who the previous year had mysteriously left the city. When we first meet Serena, she's coming back through Grand Central Station. What we quickly find out is that yes, Serena left under kind of weird, interesting circumstances, but what she really came back for was her younger brother, Eric. And she came back for her younger brother, Eric, because he had actually made an unaliving attempt and was currently seeking treatment. After hearing about these events, Serena felt really guilty and felt like she needed to move back home to be closer to her brother, to be a better support for him. And then we never saw Eric again. I'm just kidding. We totally see Eric again, but like they don't have like this crazy close relationship like you think that they might have based on how Serena talks about him in the first episode. But it don't be like that. I mean, Eric's cool, don't get me wrong. I like Eric, but like he's not as an impactful of a character as I feel like they might have been building him to possibly be. We don't know initially all the reasons why Serena felt like she had to leave town, hinted at heavily in the first episode, if not blatantly made clear later, that Serena had actually ended up sleeping with her best friend Blair's boyfriend, Nate, prior to leaving town. And while Serena tells Nate that she didn't come back for him, she also doesn't specify that the only reason she left was because of him. So there's this kind of general air of mystery around Serena and her character for the majority of season 1. Not forever, though. So while Serena's dealing with all of these internal issues she's got going on, she also finds a love interest, and that would be in our one and only Dan Humphrey. Serena and Dan kind of have this opposite sides of the track attracting type of situation. I will devolve more into their relationship when I get into Dan's character. But essentially, Serena starts dating this guy that she happens to go to her school as well, Dan Humphrey, and she likes him because he doesn't seem to hold her. No, he does hold her on a pedestal, definitely holds her on a pedestal, but he just seems so real. He's not afraid to call her out on her actions, whether they're good or bad. And he seems to be relatively supportive, and he's a generally good guy, whatever the good guy standard is of 2007. We will get more into Dan and his personality because I know people have a lot of opinions about Dan. But from Serena's perspective, or at least from her character's development over the season, I think Dan is a really positive influence. It helps her stay out of trouble, and he seems to be doing things that benefit her ultimately and have helped her to further her relationships in her life. So all in all, in season 1, for the most part, Dan and Serena really help each other to grow and just have, one of those kind of typical high school relationships. And kind of the final part that's really important for Serena's story is her relationship with Blair. So, of course, when she had left, she didn't let anyone know, and that has left a sour taste in Blair's mouth. So upon Serena's initial re-immersion to the scene, Blair is incredibly standoffish. One might even say mean about Blair Waldorf, and I could never. But she does not give Serena the warm welcoming that I think Serena maybe thought she might have done, even though Serena's known Blair. And as an audience member of the show, I know Blair. I don't know why she thought that returning the way she did would make Blair anything but pissed off. So there's that. But something that I think is really beautiful is that while the characters start off in kind of this awkward, almost enemies space, that quickly dissipates and they're able to really rekindle their friendship, which they are able to build on more and more throughout the first season. Unfortunately, I don't believe that it's going to stay like this for very long. If I remember correctly, I feel like during senior year, Blair and Serena were butting heads a lot more, if not friends for a period of time. So we'll have to revisit that when we eventually get into season 2. But for now, they've really created a very strong bond, and it's kind of beautiful to have these genuinely good female relationships where they're not constantly in competition with each other or for the male gaze or male attraction, whatever it may be. I would like to say here, though, a big difference between the book series and the TV show. In the book series, it's way more intense. It's way more like a love triangle, and it's kind of a constant battle between the girls for Nate's attention. And I think that it also gets resolved eventually in the book series, but they don't have the same type of friendship that they have in the show. I feel like the most important part of Serena's entire character really comes towards the end of the season, so I'm gonna hold off on that as well until I get to some more topics later. Since we're talking about Serena, let's talk about her mother, Lily Vanderwoodson. I feel like Lily is very quintessential Upper East Side mom. Super worried about her representation, super worried about her look, how the rest of the elite New York social scene sees her and her family and their name. However, what I think is kind of lovely about Lily is that she also has this kind of more grounded inner child that allows her to sometimes break her own rules. I don't think Lily is a great mom, but I think that Lily genuinely cares, and I think that's showcased a lot throughout the entire show. And I really enjoyed not only how much Gossip Girl really included Lily and some of the other parental figures throughout the show and gave them real storylines that they kept building off of, as opposed to them just kind of being backprops who just take the kids to and from different locations. I really like that they got to be their own characters with their own storylines and their own personalities. I do find Lily to be quite polarizing because she can be so warm and welcoming and caring, and she could be icy cold in the next nanosecond. But I think that's what brings like a realism to the character and to, you know, her weaknesses, because she's not a perfect character by any means, much like her daughter. I think something else that I really loved about the series is how they make these constant kind of connections that, you know, her and Serena tend to butt heads quite a bit. However, they're so much alike, and they do a good job, I think, of showcasing Lily's behavior as a child and linking it back to Serena. I really like how they make the characters kind of like one and the same, and so, you know, they're fighting all the time, but it's only because they're so alike. I also have to say, I think most fans would agree actually, is that Lily honestly has one of the best romance storylines with Rufus, who we'll get into later. It's found out shortly after the first couple episodes, once Dan and Serena really become more serious and start dating. At some point, Serena's mom realizes that she's dating Rufus Humphrey's son. And Rufus Humphrey is her ex-boyfriend. But later on in the series, this whole situation gets pretty awkward. But basically, Serena's mom and Dan's dad used to date. And the entire show is kind of a will they, won't they for Rufus and Lily. And I think they have the best chemistry on the show. If you don't agree with me, talk to the wall. Like, I genuinely walked away from watching this season going, wow, I would have watched an entire show of just Lily and Rufus. Genuinely, I love Rufus and Lily. And I can't, like, everyone wants to be like, check a Blair, check a Blair, check a Blair. And no, it's Rufus and Lily for life, y'all. And maybe I'm only saying that because it's the first season. And so, like, I really haven't had a chance to see the toxicity of like when they're together. Because I know at some point in the show, Lily and Rufus do get married, but it doesn't work out. So like, I don't know if I'm gonna feel this way for the entirety of the show, but after all of season 1, I loved them together. Now, it absolutely gutted me what happens at the end of the season, but I think I'm going to go through the rest of the characters before I talk about the end of season 1. I feel like the end of season 1 was really pivotal and it changed a lot of people, so I'm gonna hold off on that just yet. Now let's move on to our next character, and probably my favorite character, Blair Waldorf. I feel like it's no surprise to anyone when they say that Blair is their favorite character from Gossip Girl. I think that the reasoning behind that, you'll get a multitude of reasons. My personal reason why I enjoy Blair so much is for the sheer fact that she brings the drama. I love Blair for being the perfect type of villain. She is diabolical. She is not afraid to get dirty. She's not afraid to make it more complex and confusing than is necessary to make her point. I love that she always has to get her way, and whatever means that means, she's gonna do it, and that's good TV to me. So, I mean, there's not many other reasons. I just enjoy how terrifying she is. She is the worst kind of mean girl. She is the reason that as a homeschooled kid, I'm really glad I was homeschooled, because I don't think I could have survived her, okay? What she puts Jenny through in this season, they could have changed her name to Satan Waldorf, and I'd be like, that's fine, still fitting. But I do love Blair. I do think that in the book series, I think Blair is a lot more insecure and therefore quite sympathetic of a character, because you see her doing these bad things, but then you see some bad things happen to her and you can understand kind of why she is the way she is, not necessarily giving her a pass for it, but just a better understanding of why she would be this brutal. Whereas I think TV show Blair is kind of just exactly that, like TV show villain. And in some ways, yes, they show her insecurities, but they don't really dive into it the way that I feel like even the book series manages to do. Trigger warning right here, because I'm going to briefly talk about ET. A lot more going on in the book series and even in the TV show. But I think Little things like that really showcase Blair's general insecurities around her body. Whereas in the TV show, I feel like they really shied away from trying to do that at all. In the Thanksgiving episode of Gossip Girl, Blair is upset to find out that her dad's not coming home for the holiday, and Thanksgiving was kind of their thing. So she's really butting heads with her mom, and she's just very frustrated. And in a really passive-aggressive way, her mom kind of low-key sets her up. At least that was how I interpreted the episode. But she just said things that would really get under Blair's skin about her body. At the end of the episode, she ends up talking to Serena, who is able to kind of calm her down, get her into a better headspace, and she agrees that she'll call her therapist the following day. And then it's never mentioned again. Like, they were trying to say that or hint at an ED without actually having to say it out loud. I don't remember this ever being a big plot line with the character. I don't remember them revisiting this at all. So if I'm wrong and they do revisit this and this becomes a plot point, then I mean, we could disregard this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. And this is just a one-time mention and then never again. So I just feel like they didn't give Blair as much depth as we think that they did. I think that audiences just really enjoyed her being on screen. I think they really enjoyed her plot points. I think they really enjoyed her scheming. And so they were like, okay, well, we'll just do this forever. And eventually Blair becomes kind of a dud. But I would say in season 1, hands down, best character. And I'll just touch on this kind of before I move on. Blair does get the love triangle storyline, but I liked how they changed the love triangle to be two best friends of male persuasion battling against each other. One, I think this works because Twilight, you know, we were already into that. Hunger Games, you feel me? Vampire Diaries, I think, has a love triangle like this. I don't know. I've never watched Vampire Diaries. I've only watched that one video by Jenny What's-Her-Face about a bajillion times. And so I think I know the show, but like I've also never actually watched it. It is established early on that Blair and Nate have been dating forever and they're probably going to get married. And they're just kind of like this beautiful, perfect couple. Only to find out that Nate actually is really in love with her best friend, Serena. They had slept together before Serena mysteriously left town. And of course, he never bothered to tell his then or current girlfriend about it. As well as just Nate having a lot of just general animosity towards Blair, just because Blair's too perfect and he doesn't know how to be perfect. And he's like, I don't want this world.
I don't want your life.
And then there's Nate's best friend and Blair's sort of friend, acquaintance, whatever you want to call him, Chuck Bass, who is known to be quite the ladies' man. At a time where Blair really needs someone to lean on because her and Nate aren't doing too well, Chuck swoops in and is able to kind of get his charm across to her, and they end up sleeping together. But unbeknownst to Chuck, this wasn't just a regular hookup. He's in love. And so we have this whole love triangle, and the love triangle aspect really only lasts the length of this one season. And then we don't really have this going on anymore. But fans of the show really loved the idea of Chuck and Blair together. They were these like two scheming, diabolical, kind of bad people. And they had this really toxic, passionate relationship. And, you know, the audience just ate all that shit up. So then for the next 5 seasons, we're going to watch them be together, not be together, not be together, be together, be together, not be. We're just gonna do that for 5 years, and it's no big deal. Now, since we were talking about Blair, it's only right that we start talking about Nate. Nate is so boring. Oh my God. I know that's not like a unique opinion, but I've really got no notes for Nate. The important part of Nate season 1 is like, we find out that his dad is doing drugs and also committing some type of financial fraud, or just not in the picture at all for most of season 1. And his mom is just kind of living in denial and living off of her parents' money and kind of trying to pretend like none of it's happening. And while I do think that storyline is interesting, there were a couple episodes and some interactions between like the family that I thought were really good, some strong acting moments, but generally speaking, super boring. It's just, I think it's a mixture of being too cliche and then they're just not being enough meat in the story. Of course Nate doesn't want to go to Dartmouth because of course he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. And like, of course his family is telling him what he should do, what he should want to be, and where to go to college. And like, of course he just wants to rebel and smoke pot and like goof off. And like, of course he doesn't want to be with his current girlfriend, who of course is too perfect, and he wants, the one he can't have.
But I don't want your life.
Like, you can do all of those storylines. You can. It's fine that we've seen them before, but you have to bring something new to the table. There was not a new dish in sight, okay? It was plain Jane Christmas. It was not anything to write home about. There's just nothing here. I was gonna mention how he, like, when him and Blair, like, officially break up, there's, like, a moment in time where he dates Vanessa, whom I didn't write down at all, by the way. I'm not even gonna talk about Vanessa. No, that's too much boring for one YouTube video. Whenever I'm talking about any of these characters, by the way, I'm talking about the characters. I am not talking about the actors. I am not judging their acting ability. If I'm making a judgment about actual acting, I will say it. I will say this actor, this, or this is not acted well. This is just about characters and my thoughts towards them and some of the things they go through the season. Anyway, no disrespect to Chase Crawford. Beautiful man. Really don't know if he can act or not. So moving on from Nate, I think it's only right that we now talk about
Chuck Bass.
So I'm not gonna lie, there was a lot of hype around this character. I wanted to sock him in the face for most of season 1. And for the foreseeable future, I can't imagine that this opinion is going to change much. I'm sorry to report, I feel like I'm gonna be disappointing fans everywhere. I don't like Chuck and Blair together. I don't. I'll let that sink in with you for a while. I'm sorry if I've disappointed you. And this isn't me being like a woke 30-something-year-old. Like, I just don't like Chuck and Blair together, okay? I like Twilight. I like Edward and Bella. Like, I will fight tooth and nail. I will give you excuse after excuse. I will defend that relationship till I die. Chuck and Blair? I think they should be together in the sense that they're in high school and this is the type of relationships, we be having in high school. And like, if it doesn't work out, that's fine. Like, you're not expected to necessarily marry your high school sweetheart. But I really don't, like, right now, I don't want them to be together. And I know that they will be eventually, but I'm just not, I don't really buy it. And I don't know if I've said the opposite before. I probably have. There's probably evidence of me on the internet being a hypocrite sometime. I'm not saying it's bad for people to watch. I'm just saying I don't like it, so I don't care about it. This opinion might change, but for right now, I don't like Chuck and Blair, and I think they're overrated. Aside from that, Chuck does nothing all season. He's just a playboy. He makes really crude jokes. He tries to essay Serena and Jenny. He opens Victor Victrola, which is like a really cool burlesque bar. Honestly, that was probably the coolest thing he did all season. But that's about it. I like that he's a loyal friend when we get to the big twist at the end of season 1. Yeah, I don't care for him and Blair being together. I think it's overrated and it's not for me. And on that note, let's move on. Dan Humphrey. I don't know why I had to say him like I was announcing him to like come out on the field. So I remembered being a huge Dan Humphrey fan. I thought Penn Badgley was just so adorable, so boy next door. And I loved how he was like really smart and like driven and like really cared about his education. And I was just like, he's a good man. And then I watched this season and I was like, I think that he is one of the most judgmental people on the planet in terms of this television show. And I think that at some point I was like, I've had enough of your opinions and I don't want to hear anything else you have to say. So that got really frustrating. But aside from like just like on the surface things like that, I really didn't have a problem with Dan as a character. I didn't find him to be like toxic. I feel like a lot of people have been like, he's a bad guy. He's a what's the word? Like an incel. And I don't know if I'd go that far. I just found him to be really judgmental, kind of old school in his thinking, and not really open-minded. I don't really love or hate Dan. He's just kind of fine. I do think him and Serena do have great chemistry. I know that you guys know, so I'll just say it now. In real life, Penn Badgley and Blake Lively did date, so I feel like their chemistry came alive on screen. But generally, I mean, I enjoyed Dan's character. Like, I can't picture Gossip Girl existing without Dan. So, like, he is an integral part of the show, for sure. But yeah, that's Dan. Let's move on with the rest of the Humphreys. Let's move on to Jenny Humphrey. Jenny plays the sweetest character in season 1, and I think, from my understanding and like the little bit I've read or like seen into like the future seasons, Jenny is not this like bubbly, sweet girl after season 1. I don't know how I'm gonna feel about Jenny later. But for season 1 Jenny, I love Jenny. I feel like people hate Jenny a lot. And since I'm not as familiar with the later seasons, I don't really know why. And yes, she made mistakes, but like everybody in this show be making big mistakes, okay? So like, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying I liked her. I felt bad for her. I understood Jenny. And I feel like she kind of got the shit kicked out of her for most of the season. But man, she was so fun and so sweet and adorable, and I love Taylor Momsen. But Jenny is Dan's younger sister. She strives very much to be part of the in crowd. She wants to be best friends with Blair, and she wants to be Blair. She wants to be the queen bee of the school, and she's not gonna just let anyone be part of her inner squad. You gotta earn it. And earning it in Blair's world is semi-illegal half the time. So Jenny is really just battling uphill for the entirety of the season. And what I really enjoy about Jenny's storyline is that we see her and we see her kind of socially climbing. Blair does something that inadvertently gets her in trouble with the crowd and gets her unceremoniously boosted out for a while. And this makes room and space for Jenny to take that crown. But unfortunately, Blair doesn't go down without a fight. And so we see the full turn around of that, of Jenny going all the way to the top to like basically making it, to crashing right back to worse than she was before. Just really enjoyed Jenny's storyline this season, I think, because it was just really fun to watch. It was really gripping, and she just felt really honest and real, and the way she was playing the character was extremely immature, as any 14-year-old should be behaving. It's really easy to get lost in the idea that these aren't supposed to be teenagers, but they're teenagers. They're supposed to make bad mistakes. They're supposed to do things immaturely and learn from them, even though, you know, TV shows, characters don't learn from their actions. They just keep repeating them until the show gets canceled. It's something that we don't really get to see a lot in teen TV shows, at least as of lately. It seems as though like parental figures don't always exist as part of like the kids' lives. Like, I think 13 Reasons is a really great example of this, because we almost never meet any of the kids' parents. And if we do see them, we're only seeing them, we might only hear them say a line, but they're really not part of the dialogue. They're not part of the story at all. Whereas in Gossip Girl, Rufus and Lily were both really present in their kids' lives. And so I love that Rufus is constantly all over Jenny, because Jenny has been changing into the type of person that I don't think Rufus had raised. So I like to see that dichotomy, and we're not just hearing like, oh, my dad grounded me, or like, oh, my dad said I can't go. Like, we actually get to see the interactions. Rufus telling Jenny, if you leave right now, no, you're losing my respect. And she's just like, whatever, Dad, and leaves. And then later on, we see that full circle where she's like, I shouldn't have done that. Like, I definitely didn't benefit from doing that. And I'm sorry I hurt you. So that was like really refreshing. I think that's why I really enjoy Jenny's story, because it felt to be one of the more honest ones. And our final character, Rufus. Rufus, I do not have a lot to add on. I just really enjoyed his presence. I think the retired rock star dad thing, fun idea, personality type to play with, because he's definitely like one of the more fun parents, but you'd be surprised by how conservative he kind of is with like what he allows his kids to get away with. I just love Rufus's chemistry with both of his kids so much. Like, I think his chemistry with Dan is also really great. I feel like he spends the majority of the season helping Dan with Serena, even though he's got all these complex feelings for Serena's mom, and it's like it puts both of them in an awkward situation. But at the end of the day, I believe he really wants to do what's best by his son, even though it is Lily that ultimately tells Rufus no because Serena asks her to not intervene with her and Dan, which is actually really sweet, but also so sad, them not being able to be together because it's not really fair to their kids, regardless of how their relationship is gonna end up. Like, that's just like, ooh, like I did not value that as a kid watching the show, but now I'm like, wow, that was even more romantic. I think that's all I really have to add about Rufus. So I went over all the characters, general statements about season 1. So now we're gonna get into some of my takeaways, and what I'm looking forward to getting into season 2. So my favorite characters, I should say, were Blair and Serena. Blair, because she was so conniving and so scheming throughout the entire season, it really kept me on my toes. And Serena, because she was just such a light, so enigmatic when she was on screen, that I just found myself drawn to her story. Regardless of the fact that I found her to be boring at times, or her storyline at least to have a lack of depth, I really did enjoy watching Blake Lively on screen. And so I always say that like she remains one of my favorite characters on the show. As far as the worst character on the show, there's not too much to expand here, but it is Nate, and I guess a secondary worst character could be Vanessa, but I feel like Vanessa brings literally nothing to the show, so I didn't include her in season 1. I feel like she's just there to be kind of the helpful best friend from time to time, or add like a point of conflict. Like, I feel like that's the only reason for her existence, because it made Dan conflict about his feelings for Serena for like 5 minutes, and then that's pretty much it. Now, I do know at a later time, like Vanessa and Dan will eventually date, and I think Vanessa even briefly dates Chuck, if I remember correctly, but I don't remember the rest of the seasons that well. So, I mean, we'll deal with her character later on down the line. Now, for the best plot arc, 10 out of 10, Georgina Sparks. 10 out of 10, Georgina Sparks. I adore Michelle Trachtenberg. I heard that she was going to be on the show. I didn't know who she was going to be playing. And then when she finally appeared, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know I needed this, but holy shit, did I need this. So what I really loved about the introduction of Georgina Sparks was how they left these little breadcrumbs leading into her actual return to New York City, to this friend group, to Serena's life. It made me wanting more and more and more. So when she finally showed up, she just carried the character like she had so many secrets to hide, but so many people that she could expose. I'm not gonna lie, I actually thought Georgina was Gossip Girl for a very long time. And I think at a later plot line down the road, I'm sorry if this ends up being a spoiler, I don't know for sure, but I think at one point she works for Gossip Girl, she is Gossip Girl, but that's beside the point. She's just so deeply diabolical and evil, and I loved her introduction to the show. I loved the storyline about the real reason that Serena really left. I can understand Serena leaving because of the whole Nate love triangle thing. That's how the book goes, and that makes sense. But I loved this added layer, this added additional storyline, a part of the evening that no one was actually aware of, that no one witnessed besides Georgina, that really haunts Serena to her core. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you want the spoilers, I'm gonna give you the spoilers. So basically Georgina returns back to Serena's life. She had sent an array of really inappropriate gifts to Serena. She sent her like cases of champagne to her school, and Serena is a minor, keep that in mind. She sent her like condoms and like S toys and like all sorts of things, and then sent her drugs. The entire time she thought it was Chuck who was sending these things to her. Because sidebar, I forgot to mention this entirely, but Chuck's dad ends up courting Serena's mom, and then Lily and Chuck Bass's dad, Chuck Sr.? I don't remember his name, I didn't write it down. But they end up getting married at the end of the season. Serena thinks that it's Chuck sending her all of this stuff because like they're about to become a family, and maybe he thinks it's funny pranks or something, or to make the old Serena come back, which is like this thing that they're always kind of talking about, because Serena used to be this party girl, now she's like a reformed good girl. And lo and behold, she actually finds out it's not Chuck at all, even though she was holding him accountable. Even he has a reaction like, oh no, like this is really not good. And Chuck never comes across like he's scared of anything or anyone, But with Georgina, he's definitely a little bit more guarded about. But Georgina comes back, and one of the last things that Georgina had sent was this thumb drive that basically consisted of a video showcasing Serena not only doing drugs, but also they were with another guy, and that guy ended up having a seizure and he ended up passing away. And Georgina holds this over Serena's head, basically indicating like, you are the reason that he died. And if I were to show this to the right people, I could get you arrested. And while Georgina was there and present, she's not in the video, or she's not in the portion of the video where the guy dies. So to some degree, she could kind of cut it, manipulate it in a way where she was never a part of it, and it just looks like this kind of snuff film. Georgina also infiltrates with Dan and Vanessa and introduces herself as a completely different person, but ultimately all of Serena's friends band together, even though Chuck and Nate hadn't been speaking, and Blair, and they all get together to kind of eliminate the Georgina problem. She's just the most conniving character, and it's so fun to watch on screen. It's so engaging, and she's so believable and good in this like super manipulator role. I have never seen Michelle Trachtenberg do a role like this, and I don't know if she's done anything like this since. I know that she reprised her role many times. I think she was even on the reboot version of Gossip Girl. I would be down to see her do this kind of role more often. We need a round of applause for Michelle Trachtenberg. She's just so underappreciated. I love her as an actress. And the worst plot arc or plot point was Jenny's demise with Asher. Jenny is kind of queen bee of the school, or at least part of the in crowd when Blair's been booted out because she got blasted on Gossip Girl for cheating on Nate with Chuck. Jenny really like gets into her own head. She's really power hungry, and she starts kind of manipulating anyone around her, whatever she needs to do to stay on top. At some point, she dates this kid named Asher who goes to a different school, but another private school. He's a rich kid, socialite, and she thinks that they're dating because he likes her, but in reality, he's dating her as his beard because he's trying to keep his secret life of being a closeted teen boy to himself. What we find out is that Asher was actually seeing Eric, Serena's younger brother, and it's found out that Eric is also gay. Asher's party, Blair confronts Asher and Jenny and says, I would put this on blast, but unfortunately this would affect Serena's brother. I'm not going to do that to him. And Serena's brother Eric swoops in, and she's like, you're being a dick. Asher calls Eric like the F word in front of this huge crowd at the party. And so Eric looks at Blair and says, do it. And Blair sends the tip to Gossip Girl, and next thing you know, Gossip Girl finds out that the Jenny Asher thing was a complete farce, and they are not actually together, nor is he even really straight. It's a pretty intense scene, but I also feel like if Blair wanted to take down Jenny, way more better ways to do it than with the demise of like ruining her seemingly perfect little relationship. I know she was like lying to her friends about how far she had gone with Asher and all that stuff, but to me, on the scale of crazy things Jenny did during season 1, this was at the bottom of the list, and so I wasn't really a big fan of this particular plot point. So now we've gotten to my overall stuff. The season started with a mysterious plot that made me want to know more. Unfortunately, it seemed like that fizzled for a bit during the middle with filler episodes regarding the standard high school issues, SATs, Ivy League school competition, various house parties, and their drama. I really enjoyed the technology usage in the show. It's very of the times, but it's okay to let the show live in that time capsule, let it be what it is. They found a way to really incorporate the online blog aspect in a way that didn't make the central idea fall by the wayside. Female on female fighting was such a popular trope, so I can't blame this singular show for the entire time period, but I do think that they did it with their own sense of flair. I really love the last arc and crave more storylines just as dark and chaotic as that. And those are kind of my thoughts on Gossip Girl. So when I started making this video, my initial plan was to just talk about the marketing around the show because I thought it was so interesting and they really thrived off the controversy and, you know, the opinions of others for the marketing of season 2 at least. But the more and more I learned about Gossip Girl, the more it made me want to rewatch it. So I ended up just rewatching season 1. And I'm actually really glad with how this turned out. I thought this was a really fun dive into like my own memory lane with this show. So you'll have to do me a solid and make sure you drop a like so that I know that you like this whole Gossip Girl thing, and we'll keep going and just finish the next whatever amount of seasons. Again, I'm not gonna watch the reboot. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not interested. You can feel free though to tell me all about it in the comments because I will read them. Sometimes I just want to watch something vicariously through other people. But that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this Gossip Girl video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.